Hours to get here. Maybe you ran out of gas on the way and had to stand in line for hours and hours like in the 70s to get gas. Hey, just a couple announcements. My name is Tim. I'm an elder here at Union Chapel. Oh, woo. Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah, some woos. The woos are coming from someone who lives in my basement. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hey, just a quick reminder, we do have an app that you can find sermon notes on, you can find schedules, you can find the bulletin, you can find videos. It's a really great resource to be able to get all the information you need for anything that's happening here at Union Chapel. If you want to look up a name of someone on staff or one of the elders that you don't know and be able to reach out to them, you can do that there. So if you don't have that, you can get that on the App Store and Apple, whatever the Android store is called for those 2 or 3 of you that use Androids. You can get it there. How many Android users do we have? Okay, there's 3 of you. Oh, 5. 5. All right. Hey, next thing that we're really excited about. This has been a huge thing for us as a church throughout the years. Our annual camping trip is coming up September 1st through 4th at Camp Tadmore. There are still spots open. So if you need to get a camping spot, do we have trailer and yurts? No trailers, no yurts left. So you've got to rough it. So we probably have some camping spots, maybe some hammock spots left if you're into hammock camping. You can go online and sign up for one of those. As a part of that, I got a notification that apparently there's a golf course nearby, and there's going to be some people golfing. So if you're a golfer and want to do that, you can bring your golf clubs. I think the Steve Dursley. I combined 2 names of people in the church, or one used to be. Steve Dost is going to be doing some golfing, so if you want to do that, you can join him for as part of a foursome, or if you can get 8 or 12, even better. Another great thing about camp is that this is our opportunity each year to do baptism, to do it outside, to do it as Jesus was in the Jordan. And so we're super excited about the opportunity as a church to be baptizing the people we love, the people in our family. So if you have not done that, if as part of your faith you have not yet been baptized, you can reach out, I believe, to Adam at ucvancouver.com to get more information. We'll be doing a baptism class on August 27th. And I just want to back up really quick because I think I skipped through it too fast. With camping, so everyone will be gone that Labor Day weekend. We won't be having service here at the Union Chapel physical space. We're going to be doing it down there. So if you're not able to come for the entire weekend camping, we do want to encourage everyone that can make it to come down there for the service. We'll have a great outdoor service, and then we'll have a potluck afterwards. So if you can bring yourself, bring some type of a side, and we'll worship together and then celebrate afterwards. Next thing I've got, I think, is prayer walk. Yeah. If anything has showed us how important it is to be praying together, it's the events of the last week and a half. Politics is not going to solve our problems. There's only 2 things that will. That is loving our neighbors, reaching out to them in prayer. And this is an awesome opportunity to come out this Wednesday, I believe at noon. And we'll be walking through the city, taking the opportunity to pray for our community, for the businesses, for the organizations that are here that serve our city day in and day out, and to be having a conversation about how we can love our city better. Because it really starts with us. Combating that hate and that bigotry and all the pain that's here is really starting with prayer, and it's starting with us loving our community and being faithful to what we have. So please come and join us this Wednesday at noon. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to Mary Jensen. And then lastly, something we're really excited about, beginning September 24th, we're going to be going to 2 services. If you've noticed, since we've combined churches and new people have been coming and coming, we've got so many new faces. We want to be able to be a hospitable church. We want to have room for everybody to come and worship together and to have space to know one another and to be meeting new people all the time. And so we're going to be transitioning to 2 services. Obviously, this is going to take a lot of planning and a lot of work, but we are excited about it. And Jake did a really great job last week of laying out all the reasons we're going to 2 services. I won't go through all of those, but you can find the video on the app and I think on our YouTube channel. We've got a YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel. So please, I encourage you to go and look at that. To get really the full, he really fleshes it out well why it is we're going to 2 services. And so, yeah, over the next few weeks, we'll be prepping for that. We'll be looking for more volunteers as we are able to, as we try and get everything ready to get those ministries all staffed up to be able to do 2 services. Now, if you join me, I'd like to pray for our offerings. This is a time where we're able to give of what God has given us and give it back to Him so that we're able to serve our community and one another well. If you're new here, please don't feel any obligation to give. This is really something we do as a body. Heavenly Father, we're grateful that you have given out of your abundance to us. You've given abundantly of your love, your time, your wisdom, and your resources. We want to say thank you now by giving back, by generously giving what we have, by saying to you that we want to join in on the work that you are doing in this city, in this country, and around the world. We praise you. We thank you for today and the opportunity to join one another. We could just give you all praise as we give of ourselves. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Tim. That was a lot to cover. You managed to insult the person living in your basement and Android users in a few short minutes. It's good to be with you this morning. My name's Adam. I'm one of the pastors here at Union Chapel. And we are closing out a, Chris, I'm going to do this to you. Sorry, I know you're going to have to reset this later. I like being able to see. We're closing out a series in the book of Proverbs this morning, coming to a close. And so, I don't know about for you, but it's been a good summer of kind of dwelling in this wisdom literature, taking a look at this wisdom that God has for us. And in a lot of ways, it's very, very beautiful, practical wisdom that we've been looking at ways of employing that in our daily lives. If you were to kind of take the book of Proverbs, we watched this video kind of at the very beginning of our series. It's a Bible Project video, which is a great resource if you want to go check that out. But they kind of describe the book of Proverbs as this young teacher, this very optimistic person who looks at the world in such a way as to say, really, the wisdom I want to give you is if you live your life this way, along the grain of the way God made the world to go, then what's going to happen for you is some really good things. And if you live against that grain, if you live in a different way, then really what will happen is that bad things will happen to you. And Jake has kind of described this in weeks past as kind of like a book of probabilities in a lot of ways, of saying this is really about your chances are good if you live along the grain of the way God has made the world, and in that line of wisdom that things will go well for you, and if you don't, then it will go the opposite. So it's kind of this book of probabilities that way, but the reality is for us, we know that the world doesn't always work that way. Right? We know that. And that really is encompassed in the other wisdom books like Ecclesiastes, which talks about all of life, being meaningless. What is the meaning of this life? This person kind of struggling with doubt and approaching wisdom through that door. Or you look at the book of Job, which is really about someone who's wrestling with their own suffering and trying to understand, I did all the things right. I did everything that I was supposed to do, and I'm suffering, right? So these are the exceptions to the rule, and so there's something that's extremely hopeful about the book of Proverbs. There's something that's extremely kind of lighthearted about it, I think, in its kind of one-for-one look. But I want us to keep in mind that as hopeful as that is, it's not the whole picture either. It's been a beautiful thing to do this, and we come to the end, to the very last chapter. You can turn in your Bibles if you have them, or flip on your phone, or your iPad, or your Android phone. You can flip to Proverbs 31 is the last chapter we're going to be in, and this is how it starts. The words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. What are you doing, my son? What are you doing, son of my womb? What are you doing, son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to take strong drink, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed, and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So this is how this chapter opens, and I want to spend just a little bit of time here. We get from the beginning of this that these are the words of King Lemuel, specifically the words that he's recorded that his mother gave to him as a word of advice. Now, King Lemuel, we actually have no idea who he is. He's not mentioned anywhere else in the scripture. There are some scholars, there are some scholars who speculate that there's a possibility that this is King Solomon, and that Lemuel, because it means belonging to God, is maybe like a pet name or a nickname that his mother gave to him, his mother being Bathsheba. And so this idea of son of my vows, son of my womb would be another clue towards that. So it's a possibility. Interesting that if this was wisdom from Bathsheba to Solomon, that he didn't heed this wisdom very well. Right? We see that kind of in the very first example here. So either way, it's advice from it's an advice to a king from his mother. And she has threefold motherly advice that I want to go over real quick. First, don't give your strength to women. Right? Don't give your energy to promiscuous or fortune-hunting women, because they will shipwreck you as a leader. And history is strewn with examples of leaders not taking this advice. This idea that you would give yourself to women. This isn't about don't give your strength to your wife. That's not what this is talking about. This is specifically towards chasing after women, womenizing. They will shipwreck your life. And this is a theme that we have seen throughout the whole book of Proverbs, right? This isn't new wisdom for us. This is actually a very repeated theme. Second, don't give yourself to alcohol as a leader, right? Don't give yourself to strong drink. As a leader, you need to have a clear mind so that you can judge rightly, so that you can do what is right. Avoid it. I do find it interesting, though, that she's quick to say there is somebody who alcohol is for, and it's for the people who are perishing. It's for the guy who is going to have his leg amputated, and he needs a shot of whiskey. That's the imagery, really, that we see here. This is for the person who's in misery that needs some sort of comfort. And guess what? That isn't you as a leader. You need to have a clear head. And then lastly, she says, open your mouth for the voiceless, to speak up for people who have no voice, to speak for people who are down and out, to open your mouth, to speak for justice, and to stand up for the poor and the destitute. It's a beautiful morning. We've already spent a good chunk of time this morning lamenting the events of the past week. But I think it's very interesting. The biblical text is really clear. Biblical leadership and godly wisdom is about speaking up and opening your mouth. As a leader, opening your mouth and speaking and making a proclamation regarding justice is one of the strongest things you can do as somebody who has power and privilege. When the image of God and other human beings is being trampled on with words or with physical violence, the people of God must not be silent. They must be willing to ask hard questions, willing to speak up, willing to seek their own hearts for the seeds of injustice. I do find it interesting, though. It's easy for me to see these words, open your mouth, speak up for injustice. And I think where we can go kind of automatically is like Facebook post. Like if you haven't seen somehow Louis C.K. always comes up in my preaching. I'm really sorry. He's a really inappropriate comedian on a whole, but he did an SNL bit where he was this guy named Scott hanging out on his couch, and it was this like ode to Scott for how amazing he was in his works of social justice because he was tweeting articles and stuff like that, and it was like, thank you, Scott, like this whole song, thank you, Scott. Anyway, I think that's what we tend to think about. Open your mouth, like just say something about it. But this is directed towards somebody who that is the most powerful thing that they can do as a leader, is to speak about it. Jesus, when he lived his life, went about the ways of justice in a very relational way. It wasn't particularly boisterous and loud. Jesus stood up for the needy through giving them honor and relationship. And ultimately, he stood up by emptying himself. Right? Jesus took his privilege and his power, and instead of trying to grasp that equality, he emptied himself. And he gave up his power and his privilege, and he lived that way. And through emptying himself, he did the greatest act of justice for the world. And so that is, as Jesus followers, when we look at what is it that we can do in the face of injustice, let us not forget the way of Jesus, which is a way of emptying ourselves. I find it fascinating, out of all the things that a mother would say to her kingly son, these are the three things she's going to say to him. Like, stay away from women who are going to shipwreck you, avoid the strong drink, and do justice. Be somebody who loves justice. But for many of you, I doubt these passages are what you think about when you think about Proverbs 31. Right? Proverbs 31 kind of holds a different place in our Christian psyche. So we're going to dive into the rest of Proverbs 31 this morning. It's a passage that is most commonly associated with women's conferences and books and devotionals and embroidered pillows. And it's fascinating this week as I've talked from women in our congregation, from the oldest to some of our youngest, even teens, that we kind of have this visceral reaction to Proverbs 31. And I don't know how this feels to you as a woman, but maybe there's some kind of Christian subcultural weight to Proverbs 31, maybe some baggage that it carries with you. Maybe you cringe when you start to think about the pastor preaching a passage on Proverbs 31. Not only has Proverbs 31 been turned into a massive commercial enterprise, right? A quick, simple search on Amazon, Proverbs 31, nothing else. Proverbs 31 yielded 7,551 results, including a long list of books, t-shirts, decorative plaques, and iPhone cases, to name a few. So maybe it carries baggage for you because it's been used in this way, or maybe it carries baggage for you, and I want to make this assumption, maybe you don't carry any baggage, which is great, and you've never heard of Proverbs 31, which is awesome, and you kind of get to hear it with fresh eyes and ears, but maybe it carries with you baggage because it feels like an impossible bar to hit as a woman. I'm speaking to the women in the group, by the way. That for a woman, as you read this passage about this Proverbs 31 woman, or if you've heard people talk about, I just want to be a Proverbs 31 woman, or you talk single ladies that are like, I just want to be a Proverbs 31 wife someday, that it holds this place of feeling like something that I can't attain. This woman is perfect, and she does everything right, and everything's great about her, and I don't want to talk about her because she kind of makes me feel sick. my wife, as I mentioned, Proverbs 31, that I was preaching it this week, she was like, "Oh, you lose me at rising early in the morning." She's like, "Nah, I'm out of here. I'm not going to hit that bar ever." So I don't know what it is for you, but we're going to jump in, and I want to realize we need to address some of this baggage. We need to take a look at some of the issues we have with Proverbs 31 and the way that it's been dealt with, and then that will help us kind of reframe and be able to move forward, I think, in a way that is actually really faithful to the biblical text. So, a couple of really quick, maybe not super quick, we're going to spend a little time here, but some really obvious observations, some Captain Obvious observations here that are important before we move on. Proverbs 31, it's the final chapter. Duh, right? It's the last chapter. But let me ask you this. If you were crafting a novel, right? If you were collecting all of the wisdom, the greatest wisdom from the ancient Near East, right? Isn't it important what you put at the end? Like, what you put here matters. It says something about everything else. Even when Chris and I will talk about the service, one of the things we'll talk about very regularly is the last song. Because I think the last song in some ways holds this importance in our minds because it's what you're sent with. It's what you go with. It's the final kind of stamp or mark that we leave this space with. And so it holds this kind of level of importance. And so I want to just point that out. It's really obvious. This is an important chapter. And these are important words because they're the last words we have in this entire book of wisdom. Okay? Second, super obvious observation. It's about a virtuous woman. It's about a woman, which should immediately trigger something for us in our minds. And I feel like we've hit this pretty hard, but let me come back to it. Women hold a really prominent place in the book of Proverbs. From the very outset of the book, we meet this female character, Lady Wisdom. She's wisdom kind of personified almost in this kind of spirit, kind of abstract way. She's not an actual person, but when wisdom is talked about, it's personified in this feminine way, Lady Wisdom. And where do we see Lady Wisdom? We see her on the streets, and she's calling out to people, and she's saying, "Come and listen to my words of wisdom. Take heed. Don't go down that path. Come with me this way." It's this very kind of maternal, motherly instinct that she has. And then we meet another woman in the book of Proverbs, this woman of folly, who kind of gets posed as the antithesis of Lady Wisdom, and she's a seductress, and she wants to pull and drag people literally to Sheol with her. And she's saying, "Don't listen to the wisdom, come in the way of folly with me this way." And so we kind of get this very much Proverbs-like kind of this or that, kind of this way or that way, follow wisdom, follow folly, and they're held up as these kind of feminine qualities. So we shouldn't be surprised when the book ends with a chapter on the topic of a wise woman. It's a way of concluding this book by saying, here is what wisdom looks like in action. So Lady Wisdom is this kind of abstract person. I also forgot to mention Lady Wisdom also gets personified in chapter 8 as being alongside God in all of creation, being with him from the beginning as he's weaving wisdom throughout all of the created order and the way that he builds the world. And so there's it's very beautiful. So we shouldn't be surprised when we see the book ending not in this abstract feminine place, but where it's actually like hitting the pavement. What we actually see is a Jewish mother and wife embodying wisdom in her daily life, and we're seeing what that looks like. So I think it's important just to note that. The woman here is meant to inspire both, listen to me here, both men and women with the picture of a virtuous life, male or female, what it's capable of producing, shelter for others, serenity, honor, prosperity, generosity, confidence about the future. That we would look to this woman and say, who wouldn't want to be like this woman? She is wisdom embodied in her daily life. Last kind of obvious, or maybe not so obvious, is that Proverbs 31 is a poem. It's And this gets lost really quickly. It's in a poem. It's actually an acrostic poem. So it's lost in our English translations because every single verse of this portion of Proverbs 31 starts with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and then works its way down. And there's something really beautiful about that. There's a few other of these in the scripture. Psalm 119, I believe. There's a few other places where the author kind of employs this. And this should kind of draw our attention to it because poetry is trying to communicate something. And when we put something in poetry, we're not trying to systematize something, right? Generally, it's not the best way of systematizing, right? If you want to write an instruction manual, you don't write a poem, right? That's kind of a waste of words. You write a poem when you're trying to express feeling, something that is deep inside of you, and you're trying to get it out. So that's the first thing that I'd observe this. And then the fact that it's an acrostic poem, that this person is going to kind of give themselves these limitations. But what is it saying? It's really saying from A to Z. Right? From A to Z, this comprehensive look at somebody who's really living this beautiful life of wisdom lived out. It's comprehensive. It's beautiful, it's comprehensive. That's what I would say about it being a poem. That's what it is. I want to spend a little bit of time, though, also talking about what it is not. Somehow, we've turned Proverbs 31 into a to-do list for women. And it's really unfortunate that this passage has been interpreted this way and preached this way for years. Proverbs 31 hasn't been about wisdom in action. It's actually been about creating a list of actions for women to be about so that mothers can be better mothers and wives can be better wives. And if you're not a mother or a wife, this is kind of your thing to look to and start to become this type of person so that you'll be desirable. Which is really unfortunate that we've turned it into this kind of list. Instead of drawing on the wisdom, we've created a list about how godly women need to rise early and start cooking and sewing and gardening and homemaking and child rearing and so on. It's really interesting, however, when we give any credence to the actual text here, we see that there's only one prescriptive line in the whole thing. There's only one line that actually is telling anybody to do anything. And that is to praise this woman at the very end. Praise this woman for the way that she lives her life. That's the only directive in the whole thing. And yet, I think it's unfortunate. We've turned it into something that is somehow this directive to-do list. So much is lost when we forget what we're reading. We're reading a poem at the end of one of the greatest collections of wisdom that the world has ever known. It's not ending with a checklist about duties for a housewife. That would be ridiculous, right? It's a distortion. It's an oversimplification. It ends with a poem, which is what? A song. It ends with a song that celebrates what wisdom looks like embodied in a specific type of person, an ordinary Jewish wife and mother. It's a song about her wisdom. In doing some study on this, I actually learned that there's an old Jewish tradition of men being the ones to memorize Proverbs 31. The Jewish men are the ones who memorize it. Could you imagine being at a men's conference where the passage was Proverbs 31? That would be fun someday to see. But they learn it and then they sing it as a song over their wives at the beginning of the Sabbath. Which is really this beautiful picture, I think. This ode to their wives. And it's much actually used in that way. It's much closer, I think, to the intended purpose of the whole passage. So it's that. Secondly, and I'm going to kind of come back and wrap around to this, but it's not about roles. It's not a description about roles for women either, and I'm going to get there, I promise. I'm going to touch on this one. So the beginning of the chapter starts this way. Let's look back, not the beginning of the chapter, the beginning of this portion about this woman. Verse 10, let's take a look at it. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. Which should immediately make us think about Proverbs 3, which says this. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her, notice the female personification of women here, the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. You seeing the connection here? Who can find this type of woman who embodies wisdom, right? Because it's very rare, and when you find it, it's precious. Its value is impressive. The Hebrew word here at the beginning of this passage for excellent wife is, and I'll probably butcher this Hebrew, Eshet Chayil. I got the ch in there, so at least felt more authentic for a second. Eshet Chayil, which is better translated, woman of valor. Now, somehow, in pretty much all of our Bibles, this is translated as what? Do you see woman of valor in there? No, it's translated as excellent wife. Eshet Chayil, woman of valor. Chayil, which is the word valor, appears all over the place in Proverbs, and it's always interpreted as valor, and yet when we get to this kind of feminine part, this part about a woman, we just kind of turn it into excellent wife. There's not even a description here of wife. Eshet is the female portion of it, is the woman portion of it. But we're kind of like extrapolating on it. Somehow we've gone, oh, she's a wife and a mother, therefore this is excellent. This should be interpreted excellent wife. Yes, the woman described below is a wife and mother, but the beauty of the Hebrew here is that she's actually not defined by that. She is actually a woman of valor. Valor brings up this warlike imagery, right? Bravery, courage, guts, grit, audacity. It's about having noble character in the face of challenge. Noble character. And that's the picture of this woman that we get below. So a quick observation on this Eshet Chayil. The woman of valor is defined by what? Not her role here. That's why I think it's inappropriate. I think it's a poor translation to say excellent wife. Because that kind of puts the role into the primary space, rather than her character. What Proverbs 31 is addressing here is a woman of character. And that should be a clue for us as we seek to interpret the whole of the passage. Proverbs 31 is a depiction of a woman of noble character, and it uses this context of a Jewish wife and mother to embody that noble character. The woman is a woman of valor because of how she operates in the world. Not by what she does, not by her vocation. She's a woman of valor because of how she operates in the world. Sowing, cooking, planting vineyards, and putting her hand to the loom are not what make her great. It's the way in which she does those things. This is just a beautiful connection. I have to share it with you. The original Hebrew Bible is called the Tanakh, which is made up of 3 parts. The Torah, the prophets, and the writings. And the way that the Tanakh was originally formulated and the order that it was put in, our Bibles, we get Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. We kind of get this wisdom literature kind of all clumped together. In the Hebrew Bible, you close the chapter on Proverbs 31 and you'd open up to Ruth. You'd open up to Ruth. Now, what about Ruth? Who is Ruth? Really quickly, Ruth is a widow. She's a young widow. And her mother-in-law has also become widowed. And Ruth is not a Jew, and her mother-in-law is. And what would be common for a woman of this day is to go and find another husband, because that's really your only option for making your way in that culture in that day. It's the only way that you're really going to be able to sustain your living. And so Naomi says to her, you need to go and find another life. You need to go. I'm going to return to my land and my people. You should figure this out. And Ruth says to her, nope, your God's going to be my God. Your people are going to be my people. I am going with you. And she attaches herself to this elderly widow, which is much, much harder and much worse than being a young widow. And she travels with her back to her homeland. And there's a story that kind of plays out where Ruth is kind of recognized. She's working in the field, and she's recognized by this Jewish man who has resource and has power, right? She's gleaning in the fields, and this man named Boaz comes to her, and any idea what he calls her? He says, I've watched you, and I've heard about you. You're an Eshet Chayil. You're a woman of noble character. I wonder if Ruth ever read Proverbs 31 and felt inadequate. Like, I'm not this woman. Because Ruth actually, in vocation, looks nothing like the Proverbs 31 woman, right? She wasn't Jewish, she was a foreigner. She wasn't a woman of wealth, she was dirt poor. She wasn't a wife, she was a widow. She wasn't a mother. She didn't have any children. She had none of the things that the Proverbs 31 woman has. And yet here she is, a shining example of somebody who embodies wisdom, a woman who has character that's so strong that it wouldn't let her abandon her mother-in-law. I wish that Ruth came after Proverbs in our Bibles. It probably could have saved us some baggage and heartache. All this to say, shame on us for disregarding the heart of the Scripture, which is to say, let's take a look at somebody who's embodying wisdom in the way that they operate, instead of turning it into a vocational checklist. Who can find this type of person? They're rare. So with that, I want to turn to the passage and take a look now at what it looks like for us to take a look at this woman through that lens. And I hope that's a little bit helpful correction to say, as we seek to be people of wisdom, here's somebody that's simply embodying that in the way that she lives her life. So starting in verse 11, we see that this woman is trustworthy. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does good to him and not harm all the days of her life. For all that we've heard in the book of Proverbs about people who speak falsehoods, people who are deceptive, how the fools are the people who are liars, that they aren't trustworthy, this woman embodies trustworthiness. She's earned it because she lives a life in which she flees from deception and telling lies. And so the fruit of that is that those around her trust her implicitly. Her husband trusts her implicitly. And she does him good. She's after what's best for him. She's caring about what's best for him and not harm all of her days. She's trustworthy. Next, verse 13. She's hardworking, right? She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hand she plants a vineyard. This picture of this woman who is using all of the skill of her hand, and she's doing it diligently and purposefully, right? She's giving herself to it so much that she's rising before the sun rises. She's working hard. In the Proverbs, we've seen this theme of the sluggard. We spent a whole week on looking at work and the ways that we can operate in the work, and what does it look like to employ wisdom in the way we work. And that's what she's doing. She's embodying that. She is living out a life of hard work and diligence. Yesterday, we woke up and my wife was like, I really want to tackle the garage and the yard today. and which is a great way of killing my spirit. Just like, especially if you saw my garage. Oh, scary. Might have had something to do with we had mice kind of hanging out this week too, and it was like, I'm sharing too much now. She's like, shut it. We did have mice, and it's just like when you have a cluttered garage, you're like, they could be anywhere. They could be living in here. So it was this like, we need to deal with this. And there's part of me that it's just like, can't we just rest, you know? And so we spent the day, and my tiny wife, she like hauled 27 bags of mulch herself and spread them all. And I worked in the garage and organized tools and put Christmas decorations in the attic. I put them away now that it's almost Christmas again. But I reached the end of the day, and Emily was putting the kids to bed, and I came in and just like literally sacked out on the floor. And she came out of the kid's bedroom, and I'm just like, ugh, you know, that feeling of like your hands are tingling and your feet hurt. And, but I also had this deep sense of like, oh, that feels good. That feels really good. Because like my garage is not an embarrassment to our family anymore. It isn't this scourge on our reputation. But there's something about it too, this sense of like there's a sense of like, yeah, this is this little corner of the earth that God has given me, this little house, this little garage, this yard, pulling weeds, cleaning up. But to give myself to that in hard work, at the end of the day, I wasn't like, day wasted. No, like I look back at that and I'm like, that felt really good to give myself to that. And maybe you sense that in your own work. And maybe you need to hear that again. It's hard. Mondays are hard. You're heading into a Monday. This sense of just like, at it again. But what does it look like for us to be people of wisdom who know that hard work is something that honors God? It's something that honors our families. It's something that that creates for flourishing in our society when we give ourselves to our work and give ourselves to it well. And this woman is doing exactly that. Also, of note, she has big biceps. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong, so she's like a CrossFitter or something. Verse 20, though, she does justice, right? She opens her hand to the poor and she reaches out her hand to the needy. She has something to give, and she knows her place in that. She embodies wisdom through being a person of charity and a person of generosity. Someone who doesn't turn a blind eye. Verse 25. She's confident and wise. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. It'd be really rad to be known as somebody who's like, they're clothed with strength and dignity. For somebody to be able to say, like, that person just carries strength and dignity in their person. I've always found that she laughs at the time to come too. Like, what is that? It is this sense of confidence about the future. Right? That she looks at it and there isn't fear and anxiety. She embodies wisdom by being somebody who looks at it and goes, yeah, I'm living, trusting God with my future. I don't need to, my hard work doesn't need to be an anxious hard work. Right? The things that I'm doing can actually be about me just trusting God with this work and believing that He holds the future. So much so that she can laugh about it, which I think is not most of our reactions as we think about the future right now. Like, are we laughing about the future? Maybe in a different way? But what does it look like to carry strength and dignity, to have a confidence about your life that you would laugh at the time to come? She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Right? She doesn't keep her wisdom to herself. It isn't about her and the kingdom she can build with her wisdom. She actually believes in giving her wisdom away. That a wise person is actually somebody who knows how to do that, and how to do that with what? With kindness on their tongue. right? I love to dish out wisdom to my kids. I love to dish out wisdom to my kids. But man, I struggle with the kindness piece. And my wife is just so much better at it than me, where I'm just like, "Brr, you gonna learn today?" And she'll get down on their level, and she'll speak with kindness on her tongue as she instructs them in wisdom. What does it look like for us to be people who with humility carry wisdom in such a way that the way in which we dispense it is actually with kindness? Like, what does it feel like to walk away from somebody like that? Like, oh, they just dropped some wisdom on me. You kind of walk away and you're like, they just dropped some wisdom on me, but I almost didn't even know it because of the way in which it was delivered with this kindness and love and care. That's what I think is beautiful about wrapping this in a feminine picture, because I think women have an ability to do this, a natural ability to do this in ways that are difficult for men. It's good for us to pay attention and to learn. Coming to the end here, she's praised. Her children, verse 28, her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Many women have had this valor, but you surpass them all. I think it's a really beautiful way of ending Proverbs, because Proverbs is kind of always pushing on that humility piece. And there's something about somebody who lives a life this way where they're not seeking praise. They're not seeking praise, but guess what? Like, a person who lives their life this way is going to receive praise. The people around them are going to notice. And I don't know who that is for you. I'm speaking to the men very much at this moment. Maybe that is your mother. Maybe your mother is a person that you need to rise up and bless. Maybe it is your wife, or maybe it's a friend, or maybe it's another woman in your life. Somebody who embodies this kind of wisdom. And it's a really beautiful thing for us to point it out and to live kind of in tune with this passage as a poem, as a song, to be people who would speak readily the praises of the people around us who live in this way. I think it's really beautiful and important. Lastly, come to the very last words of this book. A whole summer. Here we go. Verse 30. Charm is deceitful. This is the embroidered verse right here. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Or in the words of DC Talk, a woman who fears the Lord, she ain't playing. This is a little throwback. You know you wanted it. She's that kind of girl. Charm is misleading. Beauty fades and passes. This is a woman who has not put her eggs in these baskets. She hasn't given her life to things that fade. She's given her life to the fear of the Lord. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And here it comes full circle, all the way back to the beginning of the book. This is what I'm saying. It's very purposeful. This is very purposeful, right? Because we saw at the very beginning of the book. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Doesn't matter. We've been given so much, like a fire hose worth of Proverbs. Pithy little sayings about what you do with your tongue and how you work and what you do and how you treat others and relationships and all this. And it can feel like, I'm trying to juggle these and keep these all in the air. I'm trying to make sure I do all of this wise stuff. But when it comes down to it, when it comes down to where that actually comes from, it is the fear of the Lord. Which is a tricky saying because I think we automatically think like it just kind of sounds heavy, like fear the Lord. The idea, I think, is better wrapped up in this Latin phrase I think Jake mentioned it earlier in this series, Coram Deo, to live before the face of God. Somebody who knows how to live their life in a way always aware of God's presence, not like a nagging presence, but just going, God is in control. God sits above this. God knows. And I'm going to live my life in a way that honors him. I'm going to live my life in a way that trusts in his sovereignty and his goodness for me. I'm going to live my life before the face of God. There are lots of other things we can give our time to. But to give ourselves to being people who live in the fear of the Lord, who live before the face of God, who live our lives before the face of God, so much flows out of that space. Wisdom flows out of that space. The beginning of wisdom is knowing our own limitations and knowing who God is in the face of our own limitations. And this is a woman who knows that. So give her the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates. I think it's a beautiful ending. It's a beautiful cap to this wisdom as we look at the challenge to be people who employ, who embody wisdom, to be people who carry this noble character. We come to this table every single week. We come because we believe it shapes and forms us. It's a physical thing, bread and wine. It's something that Jesus left us, and it's very much connected to his life of valor, his life of emptying himself, of giving himself to the point of saying, this is my body, this is my blood, this is my very self broken and poured out for you. This is the place where we live before the face of God. This is a place where we receive God's life and goodness for us as we move out of this place. This is a place where we live in the fear of the Lord, that we might go as people who embody this beautiful kind of wisdom as we go. It's his strength, it's his sustenance, it's his life given to us. It's his grace for us. Because I don't know about you, but it can be really overwhelming to feel this sense of, this is who I need to be. And Jesus says, this is who you are. So the encouragement this morning is to come and be filled. To come and fill your stomachs. I know that's sometimes hard to grasp when we got little pieces of bread and a little bit of wine. But to come and let your soul and your spirit be filled at this table. Let Jesus give himself to you, that you could go in that same way. Let's pray together. God, thanks for this table where you feed us. Thanks for your word where you feed us as well. May we be people who receive, who take and eat, who receive the grace that you have for us, who receive the wisdom that you've imparted to us. May we be your people in this place because we know and we move out of a place of being loved and filled by you. In Jesus' name, amen. Oh, one other quick thing I'll say. Sorry. I invited you to the table, but there's also some prayer tables as well that I want to invite you to. If you want to be prayed for, we have those lovely people who would love to listen to you, to bring your burdens, or really anything. Would love to care for you and pray for you. You're welcome to do that as well. Stand together.
My life is yours. My hope is in you only. My heart you hold. 'Cause you made this sinner holy and holy and holy. 'Cause your glory is so beautiful. Fallen to my knees in awe. And the heartbeat of my life is to worship in your light. 'Cause your glory is so beautiful. Your glory is so beautiful. Jesus, you are good.
Oh, glory.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Jesus, you are good.
Amen. So my wife says I have to write a song over her now and like sing that to her. So thanks, Adam. She informed me of that about halfway through the service. But now, Union Chapel, may you live your hands open toward the poor and toward the needy. And may you look to praise and affirm the women that the Lord has put around you in your lives. So Union Chapel, go in peace. God bless you guys. Have a great day.